Now, former US President Jimmy Carter has died at the age of 100.
The one-term 39th president died on Sunday after spending more than a year in a hospice.
Now, the Democrat served in the White House between 1977 and 1981 before being beaten in a re-election bid by the Republican Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election. Carter's death was confirmed by his son.
Well, we're joined now by Democrat political advisor Pablo Ohana. Pablo, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, of course, this is over the sea, but it is still will have had a massive impact at the time here in the UK. Of course, he made that visit back in 1977. What kind of impact would that have had at the time here in the UK, having the US president visiting us?
Well, it's always really significant, and of course we always talk about this special relationship between the UK and US, but Jimmy Carter was someone who really valued that relationship. He really understood the United States and the United Kingdom, their relationship together, but also their sort of brand and that kind of idea of the UK and US sort of setting the pace across the world. So it was really impactful. And although, as you just said, he's 100 years old, I'm not sure that any of us are desperately surprised by this news, but it does mark, I think, quite a sad end to an era of leadership that was defined by sort of morality and really rooted in public service, whether that was at home for him in the US or, as you say, in places like the UK, neighbouring and friendly countries. So, it was a really kind of embodiment of this idea of substance over symbolism, always tethering himself and his leadership to that broader goals of peace and respect, not necessarily doing always what looked good, but certainly what he thought was right. And of course, as we've heard so many times in the last few hours, this kind of this idea that he, his roots, which began as a peanut farmer, he became a senator, and incredibly humble start, which shaped his deep connection to everyday Americans. So it's as I say, not desperately surprising that the man that famously once said he'll never tell a lie, really commanded respect from across the divide in American politics.
And Pablo, you spoke about humble beginnings, but famously Jimmy Carter didn't follow his presidency with those sort of black tie speaking tours. He didn't chase the very fat checks that are available to former politicians, in particular US presidents. But when we speak about Jimmy Carter's great achievements, people often refer to the peace deal he brokered between Israel and Egypt in the late 1970s. What lessons will modern-day politicians take from that, considering the current crisis in West Asia?
Well, I think actually, firstly, what you were just saying there is it is true that one of his greatest achievements was reinventing the role of a former president. Incredibly active in public service, far beyond his term. Building homes, monitoring elections worldwide, ensuring democracy. Of course, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. So yeah, an incredibly active life post-presidency. Perhaps, as I say, one of his greatest achievements post-presidency. But you're right, of course, that he laid the foundations for some incredible progress in peace across the world, securing those negotiations, as you just say there as well, but also coming into office at an incredible moment of national disillusionment. And we can sort of overstate it to some degree, but right now, of course, America is going through quite a difficult time as well, and it's quite divisive. But he came in just sort of post-Vietnam and Watergate, two quite scarring moments in American history, and he really focused himself on healing, rebuilding trust in government through honesty and transparency, and always, as I say, sort of tethering himself and absolutely just laser focused on bringing the country together and putting public service, integrity, that faithful, honorable dedication to public service at the absolute heart of everything he did, whether that was, as a senator, as president, or in, as I say, his incredibly active life afterwards. I mean, he was, so active until basically very recently. And so it was, an incredible legacy, really.
Pablo, we are running out of time, but I just want to quickly ask you, you touched there on the Nobel Peace Prize that he received in 2002 for his work with the Carter Center. How important was that? And how important is it that he continued to do so much work even long after his tenure as president?
Incredibly important and incredibly formative, actually. I think, I think perhaps a lot of people look at, like the Clinton Foundation and what the Clintons have done since, and they've done incredible work. But that really, is sort of a little bit of a copy and paste from Jimmy Carter. He set that precedent of just how much work you could do as a former president, and that your work and that your public service didn't end when your term ended. And of course, he only served one term and was pretty resoundingly defeated 4 years later. But what he did afterwards, as I say, was perhaps even more significant than his time in office, because he did not stop. He continued to work right up until the end of his life, and he really, as I say, he sort of gave new life to this idea of public service and what you can do with your time after being president. So you've left this office as one of the most powerful and important people in the world, and yet you don't retreat, you don't go back on yourself, you don't lick your wounds. Actually, what he did is he carried on the work. He said, "This is what I believe in. This is what I'm continuing to fight for," and as I say, an incredible legacy.
Pablo Ohana, Democrat political advisor, thank you for coming on GB News and for your tribute to Jimmy Carter, the 39th president who died yesterday. Well, up next, we'll be recapping the year the Sussexes had in 2024. Plus, there was a big shock at the darts last night.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.